Hello everyone, I'm Elwirfy, and today I wanted to make a video talking about the evolution of YouTube and the fact that we're actually coming up at a point where now mainstream media knows that they're dying and is joining YouTube. And it's really, really interesting to see how mainstream media companies can now almost exclusively be making content for the internet. John Oliver here being an excellent example of that, because John is essentially getting more attention on YouTube than he ever would on regular national TV. I mean, not that he doesn't, but I think that we're seeing a trend here. As I mentioned, I've made another video already about the death of TV and why TV's dying. So go watch that if you want to see the full breakdown of that. But in terms of how they're joining the YouTube space, I haven't quite touched on that yet. And John Oliver is particularly fascinating as a case study because he does this thing where he very much tries to make fun of the fact that he knows that he's old and he's still trying to relate to younger audiences by acknowledging that he's old, and also by still trying to be like making dad jokes that aren't really dad jokes because you're supposed to see through the lines of those jokes. And it's very weird, but, it presents news and certain topics in a particular way. Now, whether you're, Democrat or Republican, I don't really care. I'm just talking about news companies in general entering the YouTube space. And what's interesting is that because these news outlets are joining the YouTube space, it's actually very likely they could become less relevant over time, and mainstream news might die out. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go all together, but there is that possibility, because think about it. If all the news companies do eventually stop using TV and move to the internet, it'd be really easy to just not learn about the news and not learn about world events, which would be crazy, right? Because then you'd be relying on everyday individuals to be talking about events that happen in your area, in your country, in the world. And I don't know if we want to go towards that or not. It's really kind of an unknown position that we find ourselves in, where, yeah, it's good that people are making a lot of content and that anyone can be a filmmaker now. It's fantastic. But then there becomes the issue of, well, when you have millions of dollars and high production quality news outlets that are turning to the internet as a means to post their content and to update people, as TV does die out, I mean, shoot, the Super Bowl is losing viewers like every single day, right? Like, it's not good for TV and advertisements, especially also because people don't want ads in their videos anymore. So it makes it really hard for like the mainstream old traditional ways of consuming media to continue to be relevant in our current global community that we've created, because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, I do think that TV will be dying. And whenever that happens, however many years in the future, I think that having a place on the internet for mainstream media is actually a good thing, because it allows us to still feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, but not at the mercy of a single creator, right? You look at like Mr. Beast, and you look at PewDiePie, you look at T-Series, the Indian company that does nothing but spit out Indian music videos. These are examples of people that get tons and tons of attention when really they're not actually talking about things that are super relevant to the real world. And obviously we go to the internet to escape the real world. That's nothing new. That's nothing that anyone hasn't heard of before. But it brings us to the point that if we're able to escape the real world so much, and news outlets are even trying to get onto the internet just to be able to keep us up to date with the real world, it makes you wonder how relevant news will be in general if we ever get to a point where we just don't want to hear it. You could just turn it off, and then what counts as news will be kind of arbitrary at some point. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, right? That's not the point of the video. The point is that as more news companies break into the internet, specifically on YouTube, where they can post their full high production quality episodes for anyone to watch, they don't really get like a ton of views, like compared to like some dude like popping a balloon, right? Like you could make a video about like tying your shoes, in like every single country or something, or scaling the Great Eiffel Tower, backwards. But whatever you end up doing, it's not necessarily going to be the most important thing for people to know about. So the question becomes, what are we going to do to get our news in a way that's good, but doesn't like make us feel like we're being talked down to or condescended to, right? Because that's something I think a lot of news companies kind of give off, that kind of vibe of like, hey, yeah, I know I'm better than you because you have to listen to me to get your information, right? Whereas it's not really about forming your own opinions about things, which isn't necessarily the point. The point of news is supposed to be presenting facts in a reasonable way that doesn't have any bias, but bias is inherent in everything, so it becomes a little difficult to know exactly what to do. That's why personally I think that we should actually be, not supportive of news companies, but just at least acknowledge that they're there. Obviously, if you look on the main trending pages and stuff, you'll see a lot of corporate news stuff, and that stuff tends to go away. Or like get pushed aside. They're like, oh, it's trending, whatever. But, who really cares, right? I think that at least for small creators and stuff, when you see like these big news corporations starting to eat up the space, I don't want you to be discouraged, because I really do think that these large news companies aren't going to be able to keep up with the mass public and their ability to be able to create stuff on YouTube. So I think that, if you're ever feeling discouraged and you're noticing, my trending page or my For You page has kind of been filled with a lot of stuff that I don't really know if I want to deal with, it's okay. They're not taking over. I really don't think that. If anything, they're dying and they're losing popularity. And their move to YouTube is an example of kind of a last-ditch effort to try and make something that's going to be a little bit more compelling for the general public, right? Because if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I'm a big news exec, how am I going to get people to watch my shows or watch my content? Well, it's to put the content where the viewers are, and the viewers are on YouTube. That's the important thing. You look at live streaming services and stuff, they don't have anything compared to YouTube. YouTube has, 2.2 billion users? That's like 1/6 of the world's population or something crazy, 1/4, I don't know. There's just so many people on YouTube that's where people go to get their information. People make videos talking about different subjects all the time, and that's where people go to learn. So I think education is also something that's at a little bit of a risk. You see popular channels like Coco Melon where they rise to the top of the educational platform for small children, but you realize that really they're profiting off of it, or at least I think they are. If they're not, they at least make some really creepy-ass videos. I don't know if it's just me, but I think Coco Melon's really freaking me out. Just in their animation style as a whole, and the way that they try and appeal to probably too many children, I think, and not so focused on like a region. But with regards to regions, news outlets are really meant for, at least for American news outlets, they're meant for America. English news outlets are meant for England. Indian outlets are meant for India. But that doesn't mean that being on the internet, they couldn't be seen by their stuff, which is really interesting when you think about how YouTube has this feature, I guess we could call it a feature, that says that something's not available in your country. I wonder if perhaps news outlets will still be wanting to restrict when their news can be seen, if their news can be seen in a certain country or not. And obviously, this would be the great time to say I'm sponsored by NordVPN, but I'm not, which really sucks because I'd love to get that NordVPN money, right? But no, if you're restricted on what news you can see, then that's no different than if you're watching American programming or English programming or Indian programming on a television. And I think it'd be interesting, because I don't like the whole thing of not viewable in your country. I know that's probably to keep up with laws or something, but if news outlets were available to everybody, in any culture and stuff, right? That would really change the way that we think about what we're saying in the news and how we report. Because honestly, most news outlets are meant to cater to the country that they come from. But if news outlets start catering to international spaces and trying to talk about things that appeal to too broad of an audience, it's possible they could also be swept under the rug. So news outlets are walking this very fine line of what to do. And again, that brings us back to John Oliver, trying to take a comedic approach to presenting news in an informative way, which is something that I think is a bit of a lost art now. I feel like not as many news outlets really try and do this sort of presenting of news. And obviously, even something like John Oliver isn't strictly it's not news. It's an HBO show of him doing a comedic thing about the news, which is fine. That's how it is. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't have in the future news outlets that are mostly comedy and not very much news. Or maybe we'll have even more news and less comedy, right? There's so many choices that we can go. And I'm really curious, as we go through the years and years of YouTube, how much more relevant, do you guys even watch TV still? Nobody really left comments on that video, so I'll give you this opportunity again. Do any of you guys actually watch the news on TV, or do you get it through the internet? Do you get it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube? Where do you actually get your news from? And I don't know where the news companies are going to go. I wouldn't even be surprised if news removes itself from TV entirely and exists only on the internet, because I think that's where we're going. I think that as more and more people join the internet, and obviously I'm happy to encourage you guys, go make a YouTube channel, go start out, make stuff you want to make, be happy, and escape the horribleness of the real world. And then come back to me and tell me if you miss it. If you actually miss watching TV and getting those long 15-minute ads. Oh my God, those commercials. Nobody likes commercials, right? And people are paying now. I pay for YouTube Premium to skip ads so I don't have to view it. And commercials and advertising on television is a big way those advertising companies make a lot of money somehow. because people like buy things from TV or they get inspired by TV. But if all the ads are, if no one's watching TV, that's a big section that nobody's watching. And I think as things like the Super Bowl sees a decline in people watching, or pay-per-view videos, I think that, we're going to get to a point where we're not going to have TV anymore, and it sucks, but it sucks kind of in a good way, because nobody really feels bad that radio's gone, right? We still have versions of radio like podcasts, right? But again, that all lives on the internet. So the question then becomes, what are we going to do after the internet? Is there anything higher than the internet? Maybe like, weird sci-fi stuff like with our heads. I don't know. I'm not trying to make this video go in crazy places, but essentially, I guess the point of the video is that, are we going to be making our own news for each other? Are news companies going to die off entirely to the point where it's going to be up to the general public to report the news, especially when people talk about like things being untrue, or like as editing style gets better, to be able to manipulate people into thinking what you want them to think? It makes you wonder what we can trust, what we can't trust, and it really brings back to the point that we do need these news organizations. We need them to exist in an unbiased state, so that way they can present things in a factual basis. And I'm really worried about the direction we're going. Not sure if we have a solution, but that's at least where it feels like we're headed. So anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Again, I do really appreciate the support from you guys who are subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing the videos. That all means a ton. And I really can't wait to see what we're going to talk about next. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, guys, I'm Elwirfy, and I will definitely be seeing you guys next time. Take care, everyone.